Hey everyone! So, studying is a hot topic around here and one of the most important skills you can master while in college. So, in this video, we're going to share 3 of our top study techniques, and we'll come back for a part 2 and we'll get a little bit more specific on methods of studying, like using flashcard apps, mnemonics, and analogies. But for now, let's get you comfortable and confident with these 3 larger, broader areas. So we thought we would start with one that sounds good, and no, we didn't make a mistake here. Study less is actually our advice. Research shows that undistracted studying for an hour is much more powerful and effective than distracted studying for 3 hours. Distracted studying meaning checking texts, getting up, listening to music, things like that. So in other words, it's not a badge of honor to stay up all night studying as a college student. In fact, that's a guaranteed way to forget everything that you learn. We want students to learn, and we want students to learn effectively, which means studying in shorter bursts of time, but studying with intention and intensity. We suggest setting a timer on your phone for an amount of time that you can stay focused and reasonably ignore any phone or other activities around you. So for example, if you set your timer for an hour, it might be difficult to ignore a text, right? Knowing that you have a whole hour left. But if you set your timer for 20 or 30 minutes, then it's reasonable to wait to respond, to get up to use the restroom, to get a drink of water, or what have you. You can tell yourself, I just have 20 minutes, and make a commitment to focusing on your work for that short amount of time. And a trick we like to use, one I use personally, is to change your ringtone and notifications for any exceptions. So for instance, I can't comfortably walk away from my phone or put my phone to the side or on silent, knowing that I need to be available if my kids should need something. So I save their daycare number in my phone and change the ringtone to something different from the rest of them. And then this way, if my phone rings normally, I'm okay with ignoring it for 20 minutes. But if it rings and it's daycare's tone, then I know it's worth stopping what I'm doing to answer. We find this to be more practical than turning off your phone or, putting it on do not disturb. I think most of us could agree to that. So building off the first tip, which discourages you from studying for hours and hours in one sitting, this tip is about spacing out your sessions. So spacing them out is not only more practical as far as time commitment goes, but is really effective in retention. Have you ever understood content in a class, say for math, but then when you go to do homework or a test, you can't recall the information or what you learned in class? It's because you haven't made enough connections or forced yourself to recall it enough times for it to stick. Think about it in another way, and this is an example that I like to give students when we're having this discussion. Imagine that there are 2 people learning how to play soccer. One of them practices all day and all night for a total of 24 hours, and the second person also practices for 24 hours, but does so every other day for over a month. Who do you think will have developed better skills at the end? I'd say the person who spaced out their practice, right? They're refreshed each time they practice. They've given themselves time to reflect in between, and they have 24 different interactions and 24 different experiences rather than one long stretch. This makes sense if you think about it that way, right? So you don't need to study all day or all night to be effective. You can simply study for 20 minutes at a time, maybe 2 times for a total of a 40-minute session, and do it over the course of multiple days. It's not such a daunting task when it's reasonable. We also suggest learning in different ways. We have a learning styles video that can show you how to figure out how you learn in particular and then use that information to study effectively, not necessarily more. And in part 2 of this study video series, we'll talk more in depth about flashcards and different methods. But we have provided a few here on the screen, examples for you to see: flashcards, chapter review quizzes, rewriting materials. These are all good places to start. So tip 3 also builds on retrieval practice and retention and recall. If you paraphrase and reflect after each chunk of reading, writing, watching, whatever it is that you're doing, you're providing yourself an opportunity to take note of anything you don't understand early on and potentially needing to build on for other things. We like to ask questions like, what was the author really trying to tell me here? Or out of all of this, what was the key point? A really effective way to learn and to learn what you don't know is to teach someone the content. Learning by teaching is a research-backed method for information retrieval. So to do this, it's really simple. You just talk out loud. You can pretend you're teaching a young child. If you can't explain the concept in simple language, then you need to continue working. You can take note of it and then continue working on that particular topic. So just to review, the first tip is to study undistracted for short bursts of time. Sometimes the sense of urgency or pressure to complete something in a short time frame is enough to keep you focused. The second tip was to space out your study sessions. Every time you study, you're creating connections in your brain, and you're more likely to recall this information when you're sitting for a test. And the third tip is to pause and reflect on your material as you're learning it. Pretend you're teaching someone and explain it simply as possible, taking note of any areas that you get caught up with. So we hope that's helpful. We'll be back with a part 2 when we'll get into specific methods of studying using apps and tips for getting answers from your professors ahead of time. Thanks for joining.